Hi, it's Rachel. We're in the process of being formed in our individuality and as souls that ultimately will reflect the likeness of our Creator, our Heavenly Father. This is the Supreme Soul of which we all originally came out of. And that's what I want to dive into a little bit. Because this is, when you understand this, it clarifies what we're doing here and what our purpose is. So God is soul, and what I mean by that, soul, you can think of soul like a network of truths. Truth just is. It has no beginning or end. It simply is what it is. So the absolute truth in those truths, that's what is contained in the soul of God. Now, from that soul and from those truths, what they create is expressions of love. Because of those truths that and how they're constructed, when they're expressed, that's what they express as love. That's what they create. So although truths can be very rigid, okay, and very defined and very structured, the beautiful expressions of love seem to be very free flowing and just beautiful. And that's the spirit aspect of God. So you have the soul, and from the soul emanates the spirit, and it's the spirit that is a reflection of the soul, because it's the essence of the love and the expressions of love that are coming out of those truths. And when you have the inner working of truth and you're in truth, what you also have is harmony. That's what it creates, because all of God's truths and all of truth works perfectly together. That's what makes it truth. It's when there's untruths that are believed, that's what causes the disharmony, because they're opposing the truth. So God is soul, is that network of truths. From that emanates the love that it creates, which is the spirit. And this is the essence of who God is. So when God is creating a creation, the creator making something beautiful, he is love. So what he's creating is also of love and for love and in love. And that's what we're being created for. That is our end result, all of us. So we are in the middle of that journey. We're in the process of being formed in our individuality. And I talked in an earlier video about how we came out of God. He's the creator, so all things come from him. So out of him, we became a soul, and then so we came from him, and then we also split again into female and male spirits. So we have a soul maintenance with another spirit, whether it's a male or female, because that's representing the fullness of God, because God within himself and his essence contains love, for God is love. And so for love to exist, there has to be something to love, a giving and receiving. And you see that dynamic right within God, and I've talked about this before. So we have, in a sense, a soul connection that we're all, you see so many people longing for, which is one is for that connection with someone else, to have that kind of an intimate connection with their soul where they're an individual, but there's a seamless connection. And the same thing with God. So here, in order to love, you have to be an individual, because love is always voluntary. It's something that you can give and receive. That means there has to be a separateness, in a sense, to be able to give and receive, but the love makes that separateness also a oneness and creates the harmony between the separateness. Okay, so this is what we're being created for. And so as we enter into this mortal experience, we don't remember our point of origin because it's the very beginning of our individuality being formed. It's literally a blank slate. And the first part of us being formed is this moral experience that we're going through, which is, in a sense, the opposite of all that we're intended to be. And that's why you see so many opposites in this world, and you see that in the beginning, in this reality, in this part of our soul formation, there is light and there is darkness. But when this part of our soul formation is completed, there is only light, and the darkness is only a memory. Okay, but the darkness, or the opposite of the light, the truth, the opposite of the truth, the lie, the love, the opposite of the love, not loved, the absence of love, this is what we experience in this reality, is the contrast. Because in the contrast, we learn. Because if you can't discern what the light is unless you know the darkness. So we're experiencing both. So it's also very important because God is invisible and He is all-consuming. So in order to truly understand who He is, we also see who He is not. That's how we learn. Okay, it's by contrasts. And you see that throughout this experience. So that's one reason for the light and the darkness. The other is that it truly is the experience of our own individuality. And part of that is that we have a free will. So our will, when we are first come into this experience, is totally self-directed. That's all we know. Because we don't remember our point of origin, which was coming from God, His soul, and love. Because love is a choice, so it has to be truly, freely, completely our choice. So for that, we have to be given a true choice. If we always remembered our point of origin, we would always be in that love. Okay, so it's a very important part of forming our love and forming our individuality and the shaping of our will to experience this freedom of choice. So will is only the ability, or free will is only the ability to choose. Okay, there's many things that we don't have any control over, but we can choose. And ultimately, in every single situation, there are many circumstances we don't control. But ultimately, in every situation, what we learn is that we have the ability to choose to love or to not love. Okay, and that's a very important thing that we grow into in this soul development. So we are growing, and we are being shaped, and we are experiencing the contrasts. So in our free will, we start by acting in our free will. It's all self-directed, and that's influenced by the environment around us. And that helps to shape our beliefs and our constructs, and ultimately the characteristics of our soul. So our original soul point came from God, the Father. So in us, there is an aspect of Him. It's a point, okay? But because we don't remember it initially, it's darkened to us, and because it's darkened to our memories. So we start acting in our free will and by what's around us and what's influencing us, okay? And as we act in that, what it develops is a self-made mind. So as we act in a certain way, we see the response, and those types of interactions start forming our beliefs. Okay, how our parents treated us, what we learned in school, all of our experiences. And from all of that, what is formed is the constructs of our mind, of our beliefs. Okay, and from that, our will operates. But the more that we build those constructs completely from our own self-will, that is greatly lacking in knowledge, because remember, we came from not knowing anything, we create a prison for ourselves and even for our own will. So we become controlled by fears and judgments and ill beliefs. So our will becomes very, very hindered and very controlled by our own constructs that we developed over time. This is the self-made mind. Okay, but again, this is, even though it's in a sense by all that it's been formed by, it is still necessary part of our individuality, because we're experiencing, this is a learning experience because it's our soul developing, okay? And it's our soul learning. Remember, your soul is constructs of truth. So what we're learning now is what a totally will that's not directed by God but directed by self, in the absence of the knowledge of who God is and that love, what it creates. Okay? And it creates, you see the great limitations of it, you see the weaknesses of it, and especially as you start growing into the spirit mind. Because in the contrast, again, that's when you really see the self-mind for what it is. So this self-mind is what we have all grown up with. And again, it's a very important part. So it's, imagine your individuality is being crafted, and imagine you're like a sphere, okay? Now take it in half. And this part has one little point of light in it, and that is your true point of origin, which is from the Heavenly Father, who is soul, and that love that you are crafted in. But because that's covered, because your lack of understanding of remembering your point of origin, we don't remember our birth, we don't remember our soul incarnating. It's covered, okay, but it is there. But so what happens is we create kind of this self-made mind that's one half of our individuality, and it's darkened, because without that understanding of that love of God, we don't perceive truth correctly, because truth and love go hand in hand, because love is the expressions of truth, absolute truth. So we're darkened, okay? But again, it's important because we're learning the contrast, we're learning the limitations, and what this ultimately creates on our journey is a desire for the truth, a desire for that perfect love, a desire to be reunited back to God, which is ultimately to love Him. It's creating the choice to love, and not only Him but others. Okay, it's a choice for love in general. So that's kind of what we look like. Now, the moment that we start truly seeking after the true Heavenly Father, and it comes as a very clear intention and desire in you that that's what you desire. So you're not conforming to other people's interpretations of who God is. You're wanting to know the truth, and you keep pushing into that. And what happens is you usually start shedding all the things that you've learned about who God is, and you start learning about who He really is. And what you find is He's this perfect divine love and absolute truth. Once you start seeking either absolute truth or this perfect love that I call divine love, because it's of God, it's far superior than the love we understand here, just kind of in our natural sense, because that's been darkened by our self-made mind. Okay, that self-made mind was sown in a lack of wisdom and understanding, because it was detached from the understanding of that love of God. So it has so much misunderstandings. But the moment that you seek the absolute truth, or that divine love, or who the true creator is, with a sincere heart, and that's your journey, you're going to slowly be moving, and that light that's in you, you're moving toward that light. So it still may be covered, but you're moving toward it. Okay? And so what happens is, as you seek toward that light, that is our Father's, He always answers that request, because that's what this journey is about. So you start slowly moving toward the truth and toward that perfect love. So that light starts to grow. So what it does, it's almost like it starts creating this other side of this sphere of who we are in our individuality. And we start gaining a mind that's constructed in that truth and love, because it's flowing out of that will of the Father, out of His truth, out of His love. So that's our spirit mind that's being constructed. It's very different. And again, it's hard to understand these things unless you're experiencing them, because you only really see them when you see the contrast. Okay, that's also the experience of this divine love that I talk about. You can only truly understand it when you're experiencing it, because in the experience of the love and how it reveals the truth, how it changes your heart, do you understand what the natural love is, or our mere human love. Only do you really understand what it is to not have that love. Okay, it's the contrasts that teach us. That's why this place is constructed in light and darkness, because that's what's forming a soul that ultimately is in the Father's likeness, which is to love, because love is always voluntary, it's always a choice. So what happens is, over time, as we continue just to be changed by that love and truth that's expanding, because we're desiring it and seeking it in our lives, you come to a place where you know you have found the true Heavenly Father, because you start experiencing His love, and it changes you in dramatic ways, so that it changes your perceptions, it changes your choices, it changes the expressions of your soul, because it's starting to shape a spirit mind sown in truth. And you start to operate in those truths. So it's like you're moving in and you're starting to operate by a new spirit mind, and no longer that self-made mind. And for a while, it's like, sometimes you're operating the self mind, sometimes the spirit mind, because it's this transition that you're going through. So you're moving into the light, to where eventually what happens is that this sphere, this other side of your individuality, is all full of light, and the darkness that you experienced that came from that self-made mind. You can think of the self-made mind is what casts sort of a cloud around us that we see everything through. Okay, it taints our vision. We see everything through its constructs. Okay, whether it's fear or judgments or lack or dishonor or whatever it may be. So it's like this cloud that surrounds us. Okay, and it's that shadow of death. It's the shadow of darkness, but it's only a shadow. Okay, it's an experience that our soul is going through in order to be fully formed in the way that we need to abide in an eternity as a soul of the light and a soul of love. So as we grow in the spirit mind, we start growing, our soul becomes full of light, because it's full of the constructs of truth, and it emanates that divine love, which is the spirit that you emanate. Okay, so that starts to grow, and you start to experience this change in your life. And where you once judged, you now have compassion and you love. Where you once dishonored, you're now honoring and lifting up. Where you once were prideful, you're now humble. And it's not effort. If we try to make these changes on our own, that's another prison. Okay, but when we just seek the love, of God, which is so pure, and to be in that love, that experience of seeing his love changes us. Okay, it does the work. It's the working of his spirit and his truth working us. He's the creator. He's the craftsmanship. We're the creation. But because it's about love, we have to be open to that and in our will choose that love. And I've talked about this in other videos, okay? So that's really our only place that only thing that we really do is just desire. Okay, and the more that you experience this love, the more that you desire it, because it creates a beautiful expressions in your life that come from your own soul, a soul that once cast reflections of darkness, of pain, of suffering, of lack. It's now casting reflections of abundance and joy and peace. So eventually your soul becomes full of light, and what remains is that little black speck that was the darkness of this, that was a self-made mind, but all that it is simply a memory. But it's a memory that enables us to always choose and want to be a part of that love, because you never want to be out of that love. And that's the ultimate choice that we come to, that brings us into immortality, is that we only want to be in that divine love. So we completely let God's will absorb our will. So we're not self-directing our will, creating a self-made mind, but we're letting God direct our will and creating a spirit mind, because that's what creates the reflections of love and truth and perfection flowing through us. The light that you experience in your soul is something that you experience that flows from God's will. So we always have a will, because you need your own free will to love. Okay, because love is always a choice. That's what makes love so beautiful. But it's about what directs your will. So when we came into our soul incarnated into this mortal experience, into this mortal flesh, remember that place, that point of light was covered, right? Because of the lack of the memory. And so covered, it was like it was darkness to us. And that's what created this reflection of darkness, because we just absorbed what was around us. What we move into is a place of learning and growth by seeking the light and the truth and that love, so that now it's like that point is uncovered and it's full of light, and that light emanates. But we always have that little point of darkness in the sense of a memory, because that keeps the humility in us, so that we're always completely, willingly, freely wanting God's will to govern us. And that's what allows you to make that choice. Because without experiencing the darkness, you could never make that choice, because it wouldn't even be a choice, because the choice wouldn't be presented to you. But now, understanding that you freely choose for God's will to absorb your will, and when he does that, it's like your will falls completely within his, so that your will actually feels completely free. More free than when he wasn't governing it. Because when you were self-directing it, you attracted and created this whole network of fear and judgment and confinement. But in his, with the perfect expressions of love, your individuality finds complete freedom of expression, because there's nothing to suppress it. There's no fear to suppress it. There's no anger to suppress it. There's no judgments to suppress it. It's completely free. And so that's how it feels in our individuality. So what we become is, let me make one more point before I go into that. So that point of darkness is a memory that is, in a sense, it's cut off. So our self-made mind is no longer impacting our present moment in a negative way. All that it does is affects it in a good way, which is it creates that ultimate humility to always be, so that we in our will are always willingly absorbed into God's will. Okay, and we never want reign of our own will ever. Okay, when that choice is made, you start moving to a point where that self-made mind is cut off. So it's only a memory, and it no longer impacts your present moment. Because as you're going on this journey, that's what you experience. And that's when it can get really hard and very frustrating, because you start experiencing the spirit mind that is so beautiful, and you live in those moments. But every once in a while, that self-made mind pops up, and it affects your present moment. Okay? That's just because your individuality hasn't completely formed yet. You're just in the process of it. Okay? But as you continue to grow in that soul of light and in that spirit of mind, eventually you grow to a point where that mind is self-sustaining. It's the dominant mind, and there at that point, that self-made mind is in a sense cut off. Okay, so the probability of ever being directed by it in your present moment in a negative way is cut off. Okay, and it's only that memory that creates that perfect humility and allows you to always be in that place of love. And I'll go more in my next video.